This woman does not attack your strength, she borrows it. She never arrives like an obvious enemy, never announces destruction, never challenges you openly. She studies first. She observes how you give, how you endure, how you stay calm under pressure. She notices that you take pride in being reliable, that you value loyalty, that you believe patience is strength. And that is where the slow drain begins, not through force but through access. She does not break you, she positions herself so you slowly break yourself for her. At first, she feels like purpose. She needs advice, reassurance, stability. You feel chosen, you feel useful. Your competence becomes currency, and she pays you in affection, attention, and moments of warmth. Stoic wisdom warns us that anything external that controls our emotional state becomes a master over us. But in the beginning, you mistake this dependency for connection. You think, this is what being needed feels like. You do not yet see that being needed is not the same as being valued. Her crises become frequent but never resolved. Every problem has a sequel, every solution leads to another emergency. You step in again and again because walking away would feel cruel and staying feels noble. Yet each time you show up, something is taken, your time, your mental clarity, your emotional steadiness. The Stoic mind asks not how intense something feels, but what pattern it forms. And the pattern here is simple. She takes, you stabilize, she collapses, you carry, she doubts, you reassure. Strength flows in one direction. You begin to adjust yourself without noticing. You respond faster, you explain more, you anticipate moods, you soften truths. This is not compromise, this is erosion. The Stoics taught that self-command is the highest power, yet slowly your reactions are no longer your own. Her emotions become the weather of your inner world. When she is calm, you breathe. When she is distressed, your chest tightens. That is not love, that is emotional captivity. She does not say, give me your energy. She says, if you loved me, you would understand. She frames her needs as moral tests. If you resist, you feel guilt. If you comply, you feel empty. Over time, you begin to confuse sacrifice with virtue. But Stoicism is clear. Virtue is chosen action aligned with reason, not self-destruction disguised as kindness. When helping another requires you to abandon your own balance, wisdom says pause. She borrows your certainty. You were once decisive, grounded, clear. Now you hesitate before speaking. You replay conversations in your head, wondering how to say things without triggering another emotional spiral. You grow quieter, not from peace, but from fatigue. The Stoic ideal is tranquility through alignment with truth. What you experience instead is silence through exhaustion. That silence costs more than arguments ever did. She rewards you just enough to keep you invested. A compliment after conflict, affection after distance, warmth after withdrawal. These moments feel powerful because they relieve pain she created. This is not harmony, this is conditioning. The Stoics warned against pleasures that weaken the soul by making it dependent on external relief. When relief only comes from the same source as the pain, you are trapped in a loop. Your identity begins to narrow. You are no longer a man with multiple roles and ambitions. You are the fixer, the anchor, the emotional regulator. Friends notice you are less available. Goals feel heavier. You tell yourself it's temporary, that once she heals, balance will return. But ask yourself honestly, has the balance ever truly come back, or does it only reset briefly before tipping again? Stoic philosophy values reality over hope. Hope that ignores evidence is not optimism, it is denial. She does not grow stronger with your support, she grows more reliant. Each time you rescue, you confirm the pattern. She learns that collapse brings closeness, that confusion brings control. You, meanwhile, learn to ignore your own signals. Fatigue becomes normal, tension becomes background noise. The Stoics taught that the body and mind speak early, softly, and truthfully. When ignored, they speak louder through burnout and resentment. You begin to feel drained but ashamed for feeling so. After all, she is not violent. She is not cruel in obvious ways. She is wounded, sensitive, misunderstood. And so you silence your discomfort, believing endurance is proof of character. But endurance without direction is not strength, it is stagnation. Stoicism never glorified suffering for its own sake. It glorified reasoned choice. Notice how little is asked of her in return. Your boundaries are negotiable, hers are sacred. Your mistakes require repair, hers require understanding. This imbalance slowly rewires your sense of fairness. You start accepting terms you would never advise another man to accept. This is one of the most dangerous drains of all, when your wisdom for others no longer applies to yourself. She borrows your presence. Even when you are physically away, mentally you are with her, drafting messages, anticipating reactions, managing outcomes. The Stoics emphasized mastery of attention because where attention goes, life follows. When your attention is constantly diverted, your life fragments, progress stalls, clarity dissolves. You feel busy but unfulfilled, active but directionless. You may tell yourself that leaving would make you heartless. But Stoic ethics are not about pleasing emotions. They are about living in accordance with nature and reason. A relationship that requires one person to shrink so the other can feel whole violates both. You are not abandoning her by stepping back, you are refusing to abandon yourself. The drain is slow by design. If it were sudden, you would notice. Instead, it happens through 1,000 small concessions. One missed workout, one delayed goal, one swallowed truth, one more night spent soothing instead of sleeping. Over months or years, the cost compounds. Stoicism teaches us to think in terms of long horizons, not immediate comfort. Ask yourself, if this pattern continues unchanged for 5 years, who will you become? She may never intend harm. Intent is irrelevant to outcome. A fire does not hate the house it burns. The Stoic judges actions by effects, not excuses. If your vitality declines, your character dulls, and your peace evaporates, something is wrong regardless of how gentle the explanation sounds. You are not weak for noticing the drain. Awareness is strength. The danger lies in rationalizing it away. The Stoics practiced negative visualization not to become pessimistic but to see clearly. Visualize staying. Visualize the same cycles repeating. Visualize the version of yourself that remains smaller, quieter, tired. Then visualize leaving. Discomfort, yes, guilt, yes, but also space, stillness, self-respect returning. Strength is not proven by how much you can endure, but by how wisely you choose. This woman borrows your strength because you offer it freely. Wisdom is knowing when generosity turns into self-betrayal. The moment you see that line, your responsibility is no longer to fix, rescue, or explain. It is to step back, reclaim command of yourself, and remember that your energy is not an unlimited resource. Stoicism begins with one unbreakable rule. Never give away the one thing that makes all other virtues possible, your inner stability. She rewrites reality softly, and that softness is what makes it dangerous. There is no single moment you can point to and say, here is where truth was stolen. Instead, truth is bent one conversation at a time, curved just enough that you begin to question your own perception. Stoic philosophy teaches that the mind must anchor itself to what is, not to what feels persuasive. But when reality is rewritten gently, you are not pushed off balance, you are slowly guided away from solid ground. It begins with language. Words change shape. Your boundaries are no longer reasonable limits, they are labeled walls. Your need for space becomes avoidance. Your calm becomes coldness. None of these accusations are shouted. They are delivered with disappointment, with hurt, with the implication that something is wrong with you for not responding differently. Over time, you start defending your right to breathe. The Stoics warned that when we surrender judgment to another, we surrender freedom itself. At first you argue, you explain intentions, you clarify meanings, you believe clarity will fix misunderstanding. But you are not dealing with misunderstanding, you are dealing with redefinition. Each explanation becomes evidence against you. The more precise you are, the more she claims you are overanalyzing. The more honest you are, the more she accuses you of being harsh. Eventually, you learn that truth no longer stabilizes the situation, it destabilizes it. And so you begin to withhold truth, not because you are dishonest, but because honesty has become expensive. The Stoics taught that peace comes from aligning words with reason and actions with values. Yet here, alignment creates friction. You notice that harmony only returns when you soften reality, when you agree partially, when you apologize even when you are unsure what you did wrong. This is how the inner compass is damaged, not through lies you tell, but through truths you stop trusting. She reframes events after they happen. A conversation you remember as calm becomes, in her retelling, dismissive. A boundary you set respectfully becomes, in her memory, an attack. When you object, she sounds wounded, confused that you would see it that way. This forces you into a choice: trust your perception or preserve peace. Again and again, you choose peace. Stoicism warns that peace purchased at the cost of reason is not peace, it is submission. Over time, you begin to pre-edit yourself. You choose words not for accuracy but for safety. You remove tone, nuance, and firmness. You communicate in fragments, hoping not to trigger reinterpretation. This constant self-monitoring fractures the mind. The Stoics valued simplicity of speech because it reflects clarity of thought. What you develop instead is cautious speech born of fear, and fear is never a foundation for love or respect. She positions herself as the emotional authority. If she feels hurt, then harm must have occurred. If she feels neglected, then neglect must be true. Your internal state becomes secondary evidence at best. This is subtle tyranny because feelings are treated as verdicts rather than signals. Stoic discipline teaches that emotions are information, not commands. When emotion becomes law, reason is exiled. You notice a strange shift. You are no longer asking, "Is this true?" You are asking, "How will this be received?" That question alone reveals the loss of inner sovereignty. The Stoics held that a man must be prepared to stand alone with truth if necessary. But standing alone feels unbearable when emotional consequences are severe. So you compromise, not once but habitually. She uses your values against you. Your patience becomes a demand for endless tolerance. Your empathy becomes an obligation to absorb pain. Your desire for growth becomes proof that you should try harder. This inversion is powerful because it disguises manipulation as moral appeal. Stoicism teaches that virtue must be guided by wisdom. Compassion without discernment becomes self-erasure. When conflict arises, resolution is never clean. Apologies are vague. Accountability is partial. The issue dissolves without closure, only to resurface later in a new form. You sense that nothing is ever truly settled. This constant ambiguity erodes confidence. The Stoics emphasized closure through reasoned agreement or rational separation. Endless unresolved tension is not depth, it is disorder. You begin to doubt your memory. Did you really say it that way? Were you really calm? Maybe you are insensitive, maybe you missed something obvious. This is the most corrosive stage because self-doubt feels like humility, but Stoic humility is awareness of limits, not abandonment of perception. When doubt replaces discernment, the mind loses its footing. She may accuse you of being defensive whenever you assert your perspective. Defense becomes framed as guilt. Silence becomes framed as avoidance. There is no neutral position left for you to stand on. Every response is interpreted in the worst possible light. The Stoics taught that one must judge actions by intention and reason. Here, intention is ignored and reason is dismissed as excuse. Gradually, you stop asserting reality altogether. You nod. You accept her version of events because resisting feels pointless. This is not compromise, it is capitulation. You tell yourself it's easier this way, and it is, temporarily, but the cost is internal fracture. Living in contradiction with your own perception creates chronic tension. The Stoics warn that inner conflict is the greatest source of misery. Notice how often you are required to explain yourself and how rarely she explains hers. Notice how often your words are dissected and how often hers are protected by emotion. This asymmetry teaches you that fairness is no longer the standard, emotional leverage is. When fairness disappears, resentment grows silently. You may think love requires this level of flexibility. It does not. Stoic love is grounded in mutual respect for reason and character. When one person becomes the sole narrator of reality, love turns into hierarchy. And hierarchy built on emotional distortion always flows one way. She might insist she only wants to be understood, but understanding becomes a moving target. Each time you adjust, the standard shifts. You are never quite enough, never quite correct. This keeps you engaged, striving, hoping for the day you finally get it right. Stoicism warns against attaching peace to outcomes outside your control. Approval that depends on distortion is always outside your control. You start feeling tired after conversations not because they are intense, but because they are disorienting. You leave unsure of what actually happened. Mental exhaustion is the body's response to cognitive dissonance. The Stoics believed fatigue of the soul signals misalignment with nature. When conversations consistently leave you smaller and confused, wisdom says observe carefully. She may accuse you of being rigid when you stand firm. But Stoic firmness is not rigidity, it is integrity. Integrity means your inner and outer worlds agree. When you are pressured to abandon that agreement, something essential is being asked of you, and it is too much. Eventually, you realize that the issue is not any single disagreement, but the environment itself. An environment where truth must be negotiated is not safe. A relationship where reality is conditional is not sustainable. The Stoics taught that one should remove oneself from corrupting influences, not because one is superior, but because one is human. Leaving such a dynamic feels cruel because the distortion has trained you to see self-preservation as harm. But stepping away is not an attack, it is a refusal to participate in unreality. You do not need to prove your version of events, you only need to live in alignment with it. When you reclaim your perspective, something remarkable happens. Clarity returns, your thoughts slow, your speech strengthens, you no longer rehearse conversations in your head, the noise fades. This is the Stoic reward for choosing reason over appeasement. Reality does not need defense when it is lived consistently. A man grounded in his perception does not argue endlessly, he observes, decides, and acts. When reality is rewritten around you, the most disciplined response is not to rewrite it back, but to step out of the story entirely. This is not abandonment, it is self-command restored. And Stoicism reminds us, no relationship is worth the price of losing the one witness who must live with you forever, your own mind. Leave early, not angrily. That single principle contains more power than any dramatic confrontation ever could. Anger feels strong, but it is reactive. Stoic psychology teaches that true strength is deliberate, quiet, and irreversible. When you leave early, you are not escaping pain, you are refusing to let damage become identity. You are choosing long-term integrity over short-term relief. Most men wait too long because they believe endurance will be rewarded. But wisdom says endurance without purpose is self-neglect. Leaving early means recognizing patterns before they calcify. It means accepting evidence over excuses. It means understanding that time is not neutral, time deepens whatever structure already exists. If confusion exists now, it will not magically resolve later. If imbalance exists now, it will compound. The Stoics taught that delay is often a form of cowardice disguised as patience. Courage is acting when reason is clear, not when suffering becomes unbearable. Anger tempts you to explain, to expose, to make her understand. But understanding is not required for departure. Closure is an internal act, not a mutual agreement. The Stoics were firm on this point. Peace does not come from winning arguments, but from aligning actions with reason. When you leave angrily, you remain psychologically entangled. When you leave calmly, you sever the invisible cords. You may feel the urge to list grievances, to justify yourself, to make the record straight. That urge comes from wounded pride, not wisdom. A disciplined exit does not seek validation. It does not rehearse the past. It recognizes that the future is the only territory that matters. Silence is not weakness here, it is finality. And finality is what restores balance. Leaving early also means accepting discomfort without dramatizing it. Guilt will appear, doubt will surface. Loneliness will whisper that returning would be easier. The Stoics taught voluntary discomfort as training for the soul. This is one of those trials. You sit with the unease not because you enjoy it, but because you respect yourself enough not to escape into familiarity. Walk with discipline, not drama. Drama extends the connection, discipline ends it. Drama wants reaction, discipline wants resolution. Drama seeks to be seen, discipline seeks to be free. A man who exits with composure denies the dynamic its final weapon, emotional chaos. There is nothing left to pull you back when you refuse to oscillate. Discipline means consistency. No checking, no explaining later. No reopening conversations under the disguise of kindness. Stoicism teaches that boundaries are only real if they are enforced internally first. The moment you decide your behavior must align, half exits create suffering. Clean exits create grief and then relief. You may worry that leaving quietly means she will misunderstand you. Let her. You are not responsible for narratives you no longer participate in. The Stoics warned against tying self-worth to reputation. Reputation is external, unstable, and uncontrollable. Character is internal and sovereign. Choose character. A man who protects his peace compounds power. Peace is not emptiness, it is space. Space to think clearly, space to pursue goals without emotional taxation, space to rebuild rhythms that were interrupted. In that space, strength returns naturally. You sleep better, your focus sharpens. You stop scanning for emotional weather. This is not coincidence. It is recovery. Solitude will test you. Without constant emotional demand, you may feel strange at first. This is because you became accustomed to urgency. Calm can feel unfamiliar when chaos was routine. The Stoics viewed solitude as a mirror. In silence, you meet yourself again, not the caretaker, not the negotiator, but the individual with agency and direction. Purpose resurfaces when pleasing stops. You remember what you were moving toward before your energy was diverted. Goals no longer feel heavy, they feel possible. The Stoics believed that a man aligned with his purpose experiences a quiet joy, not excitement but steadiness. That steadiness is the opposite of the drain you escaped. Truth over tension becomes your rule. You no longer manage moods at the expense of honesty. You no longer soften reality to preserve fragile harmony. You speak plainly to yourself first. This internal honesty recalibrates your standards. You realize how much you tolerated, and that realization strengthens future boundaries. The strongest exit is quiet because it leaves nothing to argue with. No anger to mirror, no emotion to hook, just absence. Absence is not punishment, it is consequence. And consequences teach faster than explanations ever could. Clean means no lingering hope. Hope is powerful, but misplaced hope is a trap. The Stoics warned that hope tied to others' change is a form of bondage. You do not leave hoping she will become different. You leave because you accept who she is and who you become around her. Final means final, not as a threat, not as a tactic, but as a decision. A final decision restores dignity because it ends internal debate. The mind relaxes when it no longer has to renegotiate reality daily. This is the hidden benefit most men never anticipate. Self-respect never begs to be understood. It acts. It chooses environments that nourish rather than consume. It walks away from dynamics that require self-abandonment as the price of connection. Stoicism teaches that you are the guardian of your own soul. No one else can perform that duty for you. Leaving is not failure. Staying in what diminishes you is. Strength is not proven by how long you endure erosion, but by how quickly you recognize it and step back. The man who leaves early preserves not only himself, but his future relationships, his work, his clarity. In time, you will not feel hatred. You will feel indifference. And indifference is not coldness, it is freedom. Freedom from reaction, freedom from distortion, freedom from the slow drain. This is the end most men never reach because they mistake noise for connection and chaos for depth. But you now know better. Choose discipline, choose peace, choose yourself. And walk away without looking back, because the life waiting for you does not require explanation, only presence. Speech end.